The mall was buzzing with energy. It was a warm Saturday afternoon, and the bright, open space was filled with shoppers all on their own missions. Women in designer clothes chatted excitedly over coffee, and children raced through the aisles, their laughter echoing against the polished marble floors. The mall was an oasis of luxury, with high-end stores lined up along the main corridors, offering everything from the latest tech gadgets to expensive jewelry. Among the crowd, Jalen moved quietly. He was a black teenager, wearing a simple hoodie, jeans, and sneakers. It was just another Saturday, and he had a few hours to kill before meeting up with his friends later. The hustle and bustle of the mall felt strange to him. He wasn't used to places like this. His neighborhood was different, more modest, quieter. But today he had decided to step out of his comfort zone, to experience a different side of the city. Jalen's gaze flickered across the windows of the shiny storefronts. He admired the expensive shoes in the window display of a sneaker shop, but quickly pulled his eyes away. He didn't belong here. Not really. He didn't have the money for these kinds of things. He wasn't one of the well-dressed, well-off shoppers who frequented these parts of town. As he continued walking, he felt the weight of eyes on him. At first, he thought it was just his imagination, but then he noticed one security guard, a middle-aged man with a stern face, watching him closely. His eyes didn't move, following Jalen as he passed by. It wasn't just a quick glance. The guard's gaze lingered, sizing him up. Jalen felt a knot form in his stomach, an unsettling feeling creeping over him. He tried to shake it off and walked faster, but the tension in the air was thick. Something wasn't right. He had always known people looked at him differently because of his skin color, but this felt like something more. His heart began to race. What was going on? Jalen quickened his pace, his sneakers tapping lightly against the floor as he passed the guard, but it wasn't enough to shake the feeling that someone was watching him. The unease grew in his chest, tight and uncomfortable. He glanced over his shoulder to find that the security guard had started following him. Jalen's pulse picked up, but he refused to let it show. He adjusted his hoodie, trying to act casual, like he wasn't being followed. His eyes darted to the other shoppers, some lost in their own worlds, others chatting in pairs. Nobody seemed to notice what was happening to him. His breath caught in his throat as the guard came closer, his heavy footsteps echoing behind Jalen. Then, without warning, the guard spoke. "You need to come with me." Jalen stopped in his tracks, his heart skipping a beat. "What?" he asked, his voice low, confused. The guard didn't answer right away. Instead, he stepped in front of Jalen, blocking his path. "You heard me, you need to leave." "Leave?" Jalen began to protest, but his words were cut off by a second security guard, who appeared from behind a clothing rack. The second guard was younger, his face full of authority. "Just come with us," the second guard said, his tone sharp, almost commanding. Jalen took a step back, his mind racing. He hadn't done anything wrong. He was just a kid walking through the mall like anyone else. "I'm not doing anything wrong," he tried to explain. "Doesn't matter," the first guard snapped. "We're asking you to leave, now." Jalen's chest tightened. He had been in uncomfortable situations before, but this felt different, darker. His skin tingled with the weight of the guard's gaze. This wasn't just about mall rules. There was something more behind it. "What's going on?" Jalen's voice cracked slightly. His eyes flicked toward the crowd, but nobody seemed to notice. Everyone was too wrapped up in their own business, too distracted to see what was happening right in front of them. The younger guard stepped forward and grabbed Jalen's arm, yanking him toward the exit. Jalen pulled back instinctively, his mind in a frenzy. He wanted to say something, shout, maybe, but his words got stuck in his throat. He was afraid if he made a scene, things would only get worse. As the guards roughly ushered him toward the exit, the whispers began, soft murmurs from the crowd, eyes darting in his direction. Some people stared openly, others avoided looking altogether. The whole scene felt like a nightmare. Jalen's face flushed with humiliation, his heart pounding as he tried to break free from their grip. But the guards were relentless, their hands firm around his arms, dragging him through the mall. He tried to speak again. "I don't understand. Why me?" But his voice was barely audible above the hum of the busy mall. The deeper he was pulled toward the exit, the more he felt exposed, his life on display for everyone to see. His body burned with shame, the weight of the moment crushing him. Tears of frustration pricked the corners of his eyes. He didn't deserve this. It wasn't right. He was just a kid, trying to exist in a world that already seemed to judge him before he even opened his mouth. By the time they reached the glass doors, the whispers had grown louder. The guards stopped briefly at the entrance, exchanging a glance. Jalen stood frozen, his mind spinning. This was it. He was about to be tossed out of the mall like he didn't matter. And then, just as the door swung open, something unexpected happened. A black car pulled up to the curb outside. It was sleek and polished, with tinted windows. People stepped aside, giving way to whoever was getting out. Jalen barely registered the car at first, but then the door opened, and a figure stepped out. A tall, commanding figure, dressed in a suit that spoke of wealth and power. It was the mayor. Jalen froze, his heart pounding in his chest. He hadn't expected to see anyone like him in this mall, especially not in the middle of this mess. The mayor was a well-known figure around town, someone everyone respected, someone who had a reputation for caring about the people. But what was he doing here? And why did he seem to be walking straight toward Jalen? The guards seemed to notice the mayor at the same time, their stern expressions faltering for a split second. Jalen felt a mix of confusion and hope rise in his chest. Could this be some kind of rescue? But as the mayor approached, the two guards stood their ground, not budging an inch. Is there a problem here? The mayor's voice was calm but firm, like he was used to having this kind of authority. His gaze shifted from the guards to Jalen, and something shifted in his expression, a flicker of recognition. The younger guard glanced nervously at the older one, but neither of them said a word. "I'm fine," Jalen said quickly, trying to control his voice. He didn't want to make things worse. The mayor took another step forward, his eyes narrowing as he took in the situation. He looked at the guards, his face serious but not angry. "I don't think he should be escorted out. You're making a mistake." The guards exchanged uneasy glances. "He was loitering, sir," the older guard muttered, his voice hesitant now. "Loitering," the mayor repeated, raising an eyebrow. He turned to Jalen, his face softening. "Is that true, son? Were you loitering?" Jalen opened his mouth to respond, but his words caught in his throat. He had to swallow hard to keep from sounding like he was begging. "No, sir, I was just looking around. I wasn't bothering anyone." The mayor's gaze shifted to the guards, his voice even more measured. "I think you need to let him go." The two guards stood frozen, caught between doing their job and the authority of the mayor. Finally, the younger guard stepped back, his expression conflicted. "But sir, No, the mayor interrupted. "Let him go, now." There was a long tense pause. Then, finally, the guards released their grip on Jalen's arms. Jalen stepped back, rubbing the spots where their hands had been. He was still trying to process what had just happened. The mayor, his mayor, here, defending him? "Go on inside," the mayor said with a nod toward the mall entrance. "You're fine." Jalen looked up at him, a mixture of confusion and disbelief on his face. "Thank you," he whispered, though it barely felt real. As Jalen slowly stepped past the guards, he could hear the mayor speaking to them. His voice was low and stern, but Jalen couldn't quite make out the words. All he could think about was the moment the mayor had come to his defense. It was as though the entire atmosphere had shifted. The air was suddenly lighter, though the weight of everything that had just happened still pressed on his chest. Before he could even process what had happened, Jalen found himself standing in the mall again, away from the guards. The noise of the shoppers, the clicking of high heels on the floor, the distant chatter, everything seemed normal again, like he was just another person among the crowd. But it didn't feel the same. Not anymore. The mayor didn't leave right away. He stood in the doorway, watching Jalen, a look of quiet understanding on his face. For a moment Jalen met his eyes. The mayor smiled softly, a nod of reassurance. Then, just as quickly as he had appeared, the mayor turned and walked back toward the car. But this time, something had changed for Jalen. He wasn't the same kid who had walked into the mall earlier that day. He wasn't just a teenager in the crowd anymore. Now he knew something deep down, something important. The guards stood frozen by the doors, their eyes avoiding Jalen's. But Jalen didn't care anymore. He had been wrongfully treated. Yes, but something had shifted. His connection to the mayor, though brief, had been a reminder that sometimes, power doesn't always stay hidden. Sometimes, it comes to the rescue when you least expect it. Jalen wasn't sure exactly what had just happened, but he felt different, more aware, more seen. and that's when he heard it. The whispers. It started with just a few, but soon everyone in the mall was talking. The crowd had seen it all. The mayor, the guards, Jalen's forced removal. They had witnessed the unfair treatment, and now, they couldn't ignore it. Jalen's chest tightened again, but this time, it was a different kind of feeling. There was anger, and there was a burning desire to make sure this didn't happen again. To him, or anyone else. But right now, he just needed a moment to breathe. Jalen sat on a bench near the food court, staring down at his hands. They were still shaking a little. All around him, the mall buzzed on like nothing had happened. Shoppers strolled past with bags in their arms. Kids laughed from a nearby arcade, and music played softly from overhead speakers. But for Jalen, the world had tilted. His hoodie suddenly felt too tight. His skin felt too loud, like it was the only thing people saw. His heart thudded with a strange mix of emotions: relief, anger, shame, and something else he couldn't name. The mayor had helped him, yes, but the sting of being judged, dragged and humiliated in front of strangers, was still fresh. His cheeks burned remembering the whispers and the way people looked at him, like he didn't belong, like he was trouble. He hadn't even gotten the chance to tell the guards that he had a reason for being there, that he was waiting to meet his cousin who worked at the cell phone store, that he had money in his pocket, that he had a name, a life, a story. He remembered the mayor's face, calm, kind yet firm. That moment when the guards let go, when the whole mall seemed to stop and listen, had shaken him, not just because he had been saved, but because it proved something he always feared was true. They didn't see him, they saw what they wanted to see, and yet the mayor had seen him. More than that, he had stood up for him, not because Jalen was family, which he later confirmed quietly to a bystander nearby, but because it was wrong. What the guards did was wrong. That small act, simple as it looked, had meant everything. Still, it didn't erase the hurt. Jalen leaned back and looked at the high glass ceiling above him. He thought about how quickly things had changed, how fast he went from being a normal teen to a suspect, and then to someone people suddenly whispered about because of who he knew. And that's what made him angry again. Would they have treated him differently if they had known from the start that he was related to the mayor? Would they have let him walk, smiled at him, maybe even said, "Have a good day," if he wore a suit or had lighter skin? He didn't want people to treat him better just because of his last name or his family connections. He wanted to be treated fairly because he was human. That thought stuck in his chest like a stone. He remembered how he had frozen when the guard grabbed him, not because he was weak, but because he was scared that one wrong move would have made things worse. He wondered how many other kids had felt that same fear, how many had been pulled out of stores, followed by eyes that only saw color or clothes, or the wrong zip code. Jalen closed his eyes and took a deep breath. This wasn't just about today. It was about all the times people like him were treated like they didn't belong, even when they did. About all the times silence filled the space where justice should have been. Today had changed something inside him. He knew now that being quiet wasn't enough, that pretending to be invisible wouldn't protect him, and that sometimes, even if your voice shakes, you have to speak. He didn't know exactly what he'd do next, but he knew this: he would remember this day, not just the pain, but the lesson. And one day, he would make sure someone else didn't have to feel the way he did. Not if he could help it. Word of the incident spread fast. By the time Jalen left the mall that day, videos were already floating around online. Someone had filmed the guards dragging him out. Another person had caught the moment the mayor stepped in. The clip wasn't long, just a few seconds of tension, followed by the mayor's firm voice, telling the guards to let Jalen go. But it was enough. By evening, the video had thousands of views. Comments flooded in. Some people were angry, others were shocked. A few tried to defend the guards, saying they were just doing their job, but most people saw it for what it was: profiling, public shaming, plain injustice. Jalen's phone buzzed constantly. Friends from school texted. His cousin called. His mom, who had been working a double shift, rushed home early, worried sick when she saw his name trending online. When she got home, she hugged him tight, so tight it hurt a little, and said nothing for a long time. Jalen didn't cry. Not then. He just stood there, wrapped in his mother's arms, listening to the silence that spoke louder than any words. Later, the mayor reached out privately. He invited Jalen and his mother to City Hall, not for a press event, not for cameras, but for a real talk, a real moment. In his office, the mayor apologized, not just for what happened to Jalen, but for all the times it had happened to kids like him and gone unnoticed. You didn't deserve that, he said, and I won't pretend it's rare, but I promise you what happened today won't be ignored. Jalen didn't know what to say, but hearing those words, simple, honest, meant more than he expected. The city held a meeting a week later. The mall's security company came under review. New training policies were announced, and most important of all, Jalen was asked to speak. He was nervous. His palms were sweaty, his knees shaky, but when he stepped up to the microphone, something inside him felt solid. He didn't yell, he didn't cry, he just told the truth. I wasn't doing anything wrong, he said, but they treated me like I was. And it hurt. Not just because it was unfair, but because it happens to people like me all the time. People who don't have a mayor walking in at the right moment. People who go through worse, and no one sees it. The room was quiet. Some eyes were glassy. A few nodded slowly. I'm not here to be famous, he finished. I just want to walk through a mall without being followed. I just want to be a teenager. That's all. When he stepped down, people stood and clapped. Not because he was perfect, not because he had all the answers, but because he was brave enough to speak the truth. That day didn't erase what happened, but it turned the pain into something bigger than just Jalen's story. It became a call to pay attention, to ask questions, and to never look away again. Jalen went back to school. Life continued, but something had changed. Now when he walked into places that used to make him feel small, he stood a little taller. He still wore his hoodie and sneakers, but he wore them like armor now. Not to hide, but to say, this is who I am, and I deserve to be seen. The whispers at the mall that day had tried to shrink him, but in the end, they did the opposite. They helped Jalen find his voice. And once he found it, he knew he'd never give it up. Weeks later, Jalen stood at the edge of the same mall, where everything had happened. The glass doors still shimmered under the afternoon sun. The same security guards weren't there anymore. New faces had replaced them, trained differently, acting differently. But even with all the changes, the memory still lingered. He could still feel the cold grip on his arms, still hear the whispers, still see the look on people's faces. But this time, he wasn't just a teenager walking through a mall. He was the boy in the video. The one who had been dragged out and walked back in. The one who had spoken in front of the city. The one people now looked at not with suspicion, but with respect. A group of middle schoolers walked by, and one of them pointed. That's him. A girl whispered to her friend. That's Jalen. He turned and gave a small wave. They smiled. Jalen didn't want to be famous. He didn't want attention. He just wanted fairness. For himself, for his friends, for every kid who looked like him. As he walked into the mall, he passed by a wall where a new poster hung. It read, "Respect, fairness. Everyone belongs." Below it was a photo of young people from all backgrounds, different skin tones, different styles, all smiling. Jalen paused for a second, letting the moment sink in. He knew change wouldn't happen overnight, but it had started. And maybe, just maybe, his story had helped open a door for others to walk through safely, without fear. He smiled to himself. Then he kept walking, shoulders straight, head held high. He wasn't just walking back in, he was claiming his place. If this story moved you, don't forget to like the video to help more people hear it. Share your thoughts or your own experience in the comments. We read every one, and make sure to subscribe for more true stories that need to be heard. Your voice matters. Your presence matters. Let's keep this conversation going.